Boy helps homeless man, and the next day, the police bring surprising news. It was a sunny afternoon, and the small town seemed wrapped in an almost palpable tranquility. The streets were lined with trees, modest houses with well-kept gardens, and an air of serenity that seemed to envelop everything. The leaves on the trees danced gently in the wind, and the distant sound of children playing echoed through the neighborhood. Lucas, a 10-year-old boy, walked along the sidewalk on his way home after another day at school. He was a curious and kind boy, always willing to help those in need. That day, his mother had placed an extra sandwich in his lunchbox. "In case you feel hungry before you get home," she said, as she did occasionally. But Lucas wasn't hungry, so he ended up bringing the sandwich back with him. As he crossed the town park on his way home, something caught his attention. Sitting on one of the benches near a large tree was a man with a worn-out appearance. He was dressed in old clothes that had seen better days and held a small, faded backpack by his side. His eyes, shadowed by a scruffy beard, stared at the ground with an expression of deep exhaustion, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. Lucas stopped for a moment, observing the man. He felt an urge, a desire to help. He knew he wasn't supposed to talk to strangers, but without thinking twice, he slowly approached. "Hi, sir," Lucas said in his soft voice, trying not to startle the man. The man lifted his eyes, surprised by the boy's approach. "Are you hungry?" Lucas continued, extending the sandwich he had saved. The man blinked a few times, as if trying to understand if this was real. The surprise on his face softened into a tired but genuine smile. I thank you, kid," the man replied, his voice hoarse and trembling. "I don't know how to thank you. I really needed something to eat." Lucas smiled back, feeling satisfied. "You don't need to thank me. I just hope you like it." He handed the sandwich to the man, who took it with trembling hands, as if holding something precious. For a moment, the two remained silent. Lucas watched as the man unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite. That small gesture, that simple act of kindness, seemed to have a profound impact on the man. His eyes closed for a moment, as if he was savoring not just the food, but also the humanity that had been offered to him. "What's your name?" Lucas asked, breaking the silence. "The name's Tom," the man said after swallowing the food. "Tom McAllister. And yours, kid?" "Lucas," the boy replied, smiling. "Lucas," Tom repeated, as if wanting to etch the name in his memory. "You're a good boy, Lucas. Thank you very much." Lucas shrugged as if what he had done was the most natural thing in the world. "I hope you stay well, Tom." And with a wave, he said goodbye and continued his walk home. As he walked, Lucas felt a strange sense of satisfaction mixed with curiosity. Who was that man? Was he lost? Questions swirled in his mind, but he knew he might never have the answers. What mattered was that he had done his part. Tom, on the other hand, remained seated on the bench for some time, savoring the sandwich and the gesture of kindness that seemed to have rekindled something inside him, something he had long forgotten. He looked around, seeing people passing by, some casting quick glances, others pretending not to notice his presence. But he didn't care. At that moment, all he felt was a deep and unexpected gratitude. Lucas arrived home shortly after, where his mother was waiting with a smile. He didn't mention the encounter in the park. To him, it was just a small gesture, something he did because he believed it was the right thing to do. But little did he know that in a few days, his life would be completely turned upside down. It was a peaceful morning at Lucas's house. The smell of fresh pancakes filled the kitchen, and Lucas, sitting at the table, eagerly awaited breakfast. He hadn't mentioned to Amanda, his mother, the encounter with Tom in the park, thinking it was just a small gesture without any major consequences. Suddenly, firm knocks on the door interrupted the peaceful moment. Amanda exchanged a curious glance with Lucas before answering the door. Outside stood two uniformed police officers with serious expressions that immediately made her apprehensive. "Good morning, ma'am," one of the officers said politely. "May we speak with you for a few minutes?" "Of course, come in," Amanda replied, trying to hide the concern in her voice. Lucas watched from the table, not understanding what was happening. The officers entered, and after brief introductions, they got straight to the point. "We've received information about a man who was seen in town recently. Some people recognized him after he was seen receiving help from a boy in the park. We understand that boy may be your son. Are you aware of anything like this?" Amanda frowned. "I'm not aware of anything. Lucas, could you come here for a moment?" Lucas, a little apprehensive, approached slowly. Amanda looked at him with concern. "Lucas, did you meet someone in the park? Is there something you want to tell me?" Lucas hesitated, but finally nodded. "Yes, Mom. I saw a man in the park and gave him the sandwich you made for me. He seemed to need it." Amanda looked surprised but tried to remain calm. "Did he mention his name?" one of the officers asked, focusing on Lucas. "He said his name was Tom," Lucas replied. "He was very sad and tired." The officers exchanged significant glances. "Tom," one of them repeated. "Can you describe him?" Lucas described the man as best he could: gray hair, scruffy beard, worn clothes, and a look that seemed to carry the weight of the world. The officers listened attentively, taking notes. Amanda, now more concerned, asked, "What does this mean? Who is this man?" One of the officers replied cautiously, "We're investigating a missing person case from many years ago. Some people think they may have recognized this man, and it has caused the case to be reopened. We still need to gather more information." Amanda nodded slowly. "If you need anything else, we're willing to help." The officers thanked her, appreciating her willingness. "Please, if you see this man again, contact us immediately," one of them said before leaving. After the officers left, Amanda turned to Lucas, trying to calm him down. "You did a good thing, Lucas, but it seems there's more to this story. Let's follow the officers' instructions and hope Tom is okay." Lucas nodded, but something inside him told him this story was far from over. When Richard arrived home that evening, he found Amanda and Lucas in the kitchen. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of tension and anticipation. Amanda had prepared dinner, but the conversation that was about to take place seemed more urgent than any meal. "Hi, everyone," Richard said as he noticed the seriousness on his wife and son's faces. "What happened?" Amanda exchanged a look with Lucas before she began to speak. "Well, something unusual happened." She explained everything, from Lucas's encounter with Tom in the park to the visit from the police officers that morning. Richard listened attentively, his brow furrowed as Amanda recounted the events. When Amanda finished, Richard turned to Lucas, his gaze firm but not severe. "Lucas, I know you did a good thing by helping that man. You have a big heart, and I'm proud of that. But you also need to understand that not everyone is safe to approach. It could have been dangerous." Lucas looked at his father, taking in his words. He knew Richard was right, but something inside him compelled him to help, and he couldn't regret what he had done. "I know, Dad, but he looked so sad. I just wanted to help." Richard sighed and placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "And you did, son, but we need to be careful, okay? Now, if the police need you, we'll go together. Understood?" Lucas nodded, feeling a bit better with his father's support. "Yes, Dad." In the days that followed, Lucas continued his normal routine but always kept an eye out as he walked home from school. However, Tom didn't appear in the park anymore. Lucas began to wonder what had happened to him and why the police were so interested in finding him. One afternoon, a few days later, the calm of the house was once again interrupted by a knock on the door. Amanda opened it and saw the same police officers who had been there before. "Good afternoon," one of the officers said, with a more urgent tone. We still haven't been able to locate the man Lucas met in the park. We need help to conduct a search. We think he may be avoiding the usual places, but we'd like Lucas to come with us to the park just to see if he's there." Lucas, who had overheard the conversation, approached. "I haven't seen him again, but I can help." Amanda looked at Richard, who nodded. "All right, we'll go together." Lucas looked at the officers and, a little shy, asked, "Can I ride in the police car with you?" The officers smiled. "Of course, Lucas. Let's go." Lucas's face lit up at the opportunity. Riding in a police car was an experience he had never imagined having. He quickly said goodbye to Amanda and Richard, promising to behave, and got into the car with the officers. Inside the police car, Lucas felt the excitement take over. The lights, the radios, the work environment of the officers, everything was fascinating to him. He tried not to show too much enthusiasm, but his eyes sparkled with curiosity as the car moved through the streets of the town. The drive to the park was quick, but to Lucas, it felt like a small adventure. He watched every corner, every landmark, imagining where Tom might be. When the car finally stopped and the officers got out, Lucas felt a slight pang of anxiety mixed with determination. He wanted to help. He wanted to find Tom again. Amanda and Richard arrived shortly after, having followed the car to the park. They found Lucas standing next to the officers, his eyes fixed on the trees and benches ahead of him. The park was quiet that afternoon, but there was a tension in the air. The silence was almost oppressive as everyone looked around, waiting for the first sign of Tom. The chapter ends with everyone standing in the park, ready to begin the search. What they would find next was shrouded in mystery. The park was enveloped in a strange calm that afternoon. Lucas, his parents, and the officers walked slowly along the familiar paths, but the atmosphere was different, laden with a silent expectation. Lucas looked around, anxiously searching for any sign of Tom, while the rest of the group remained alert, absorbing every detail around them. The park, usually a place of tranquility and leisure, seemed to have acquired a new dimension, full of secrets yet to be unveiled. The air was heavy with anticipation, and even the sound of dry leaves underfoot seemed louder than usual. Lucas, determined to help, led the way with the hope that Tom was nearby. They reached the spot where Lucas had last seen Tom, the bench near a large tree. The bench was empty, and the silence around it suggested that Tom was not there. Lucas felt a pang of disappointment, but didn't give up. He remembered a more secluded trail in the park, a place less frequented, and suggested they go there. "Let's check near that trail," Lucas said, pointing in the direction he had in mind. The officers exchanged glances and nodded. "Good idea, Lucas. Let's take a look." The trail was in a more isolated area of the park, surrounded by tall trees that formed a natural tunnel, blocking out some of the sunlight and creating a dimly lit environment. As they advanced along the trail, Lucas felt his nervousness grow, but also a strange certainty that they were on the right path. Dry branches cracked underfoot, and the sound echoed along the trail, heightening the tension. The atmosphere was almost oppressive, and everyone walked in silence, focused on every detail around them. Lucas began to feel anxious, his heart beating faster as they moved forward. He looked from side to side, searching for any sign of movement, anything that might indicate Tom's presence. And then he saw him. Near an old oak tree, partially hidden by the shadows of the trees, sat Tom. He was sitting on the ground, his back against the trunk, looking even more worn out than the last time Lucas had seen him. Tom didn't seem to have noticed the group's approach, his eyes fixed on the ground, oblivious to the world around him. Lucas stopped, and the officers quickly noticed what he was looking at. For a moment, everyone was silent, observing Tom from a distance. The air around them seemed to grow thicker, as if everyone was holding their breath. Lucas took a hesitant step forward and called out, "Tom?" Tom slowly lifted his eyes, and their gazes met. For an instant, time seemed to stop. There was something in Tom's eyes, a mixture of surprise and resignation. He knew this moment would come, and now that it had, there was nowhere left to run. Tom, sitting at the base of the old oak tree, finally realized the presence of the officers approaching, accompanied by Lucas and his parents. A tremor of fear passed through his body, and he instinctively tried to stand, his eyes wide with panic. Memories of past times, orders shouted, explosions, and the constant sound of gunfire came flooding back into his mind in a confusing whirlwind. He recoiled, his body tense like a cornered animal. "Tom, it's okay," one of the officers said calmly, noticing the fear in the man's eyes. He raised his hands in a conciliatory manner, trying to convey that he wasn't a threat. "We're here to help." But Tom was far from feeling safe. His eyes darted quickly between the officers, Lucas, and his family. The traumas of the past were alive within him, and the sight of the uniforms awakened memories he had tried in vain to bury. "No, don't come any closer," Tom murmured, his voice hoarse and laden with terror. "I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to that hell." Lucas, realizing Tom's despair, took a step forward, trying to reach out to him. "Tom, they just want to help. They're friends. Like me." Lucas's soft voice pierced the barrier of fear surrounding Tom. The man blinked, trying to focus on the boy's face. There was something in Lucas's voice, a purity and kindness that slowly began to penetrate the fog of terror clouding Tom's mind. "Lucas," Tom whispered, as if trying to remember where he knew the boy from. He began to relax a little, but the tension was still visible in every movement. The officers, seeing that Lucas was managing to calm Tom, kept their distance, hoping the boy could help the situation. Richard and Amanda watched in silence, their hearts aching to see how much this man was suffering. Finally, Tom began to breathe more calmly, his eyes losing some of their panic. He looked at Lucas and then at the officers, who continued to keep their hands visible and their expressions friendly. Gradually, he understood that he was safe, that these men weren't there to take him back to war. I trust you, Lucas," Tom said, his voice still trembling. He turned to the officers. "I don't know what to do anymore. I can't escape my memories." One of the officers stepped forward, speaking in a reassuring tone. "Tom, we're here to make sure you get the help you need. We know you've been through a lot, but now you don't have to face it alone." At that moment, Tom's expression changed. He seemed like a man who was tired, exhausted from fighting his own demons. He knew he couldn't go on like this, running from everyone and everything, trying to hide the deep scars that had marked him. And then, as if in a whirlwind of memories, Tom was transported back to the past. Tom McAllister had been a young soldier, full of hope and patriotism when he enlisted in the army. He believed he could make a difference, that his courage could save lives and change the course of history. But war was cruel. It didn't just take lives, it destroyed souls, including Tom's. What Tom witnessed on the battlefield never left his mind. He saw close friends consumed by violence, felt the constant fear of death, and the guilt of surviving while so many others didn't. The screams of his fallen comrades echoed in his mind, day and night, without rest. When the war finally ended, Tom couldn't return to normal life. The civilized world seemed distant, incomprehensible. The people around him couldn't understand what he had experienced, and that isolated him even more. He tried to adapt, to return to his family, but the weight of his memories and the relentless nightmares pushed him further away from everything and everyone. He wandered the streets, unable to find peace, the war still raging in his mind. His days became a sequence of attempts to avoid the triggers that brought back the horror he wanted to forget. But it was impossible. The war never left him. He lost everything: his family, his friends, and finally, even hope. Back in the present, Tom let out a heavy sigh, as if the simple act of breathing was a burden. He looked at Lucas, whose eyes were wide with the intensity of what Tom had just shared, even though he hadn't heard all the words. "You made a difference, kid," Tom said, his voice choked with emotion. For a moment, I wasn't alone." Lucas felt a lump in his throat, but tried to smile at Tom. "You're not alone now, Tom. You have us, and they're going to help you." Tom nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. "I hope so. I really hope so." The officers, seeing that Tom was ready, approached once again, carefully. "We'll take you to a safe place, Tom. There, you'll get the help you need." Tom got up with difficulty, but without resisting. He turned to Lucas, Richard, and Amanda and tried to smile, though it was a sad smile, full of regret. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me." Amanda stepped forward and gently touched Tom's arm. "You deserve this chance. Take care of yourself." With one last look at Lucas, Tom followed the officers to the police car. Lucas watched as they helped Tom into the car, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. He knew Tom was going to a place where he could start to heal, but he also knew that the road would be long and difficult. As the police car drove away, Lucas held his mother's hand, feeling the connection he had made with Tom. He didn't know exactly what the future held for that man, but he was grateful to have been able to do something, no matter how small. The park returned to silence, but now for Lucas, that silence had a new meaning. He knew that Tom wouldn't be alone anymore, and that alone was a beginning. Tom felt the weight of exhaustion in every part of his body as the officers carefully guided him into the police station. Despite the apparent coldness of the environment, there was a human warmth that he hadn't felt in a long time. He was greeted by a social worker who offered him a gentle smile and a bottle of water. Tom accepted it with gratitude, but the water barely moistened the throat dry from recent emotions. They seated him in a small room, away from the noise of the streets and the bustle of the station. One of the officers returned with a simple tray, bread, hot soup, and some fruit. It was a modest meal, but for Tom, it was a feast. He couldn't remember the last time he had eaten something hot. As he ate slowly, savoring each bite, he began to feel the tension in his body relax. After the meal, Tom was taken to a small room where clean clothes awaited him. The clothes were simple but clean and comfortable, a luxury he hadn't had in years. After a hot shower, Tom began to feel more human, more connected with himself. The shower washed away not only the dirt accumulated from days on the street, but also some of the weight he carried in his soul. Dressed in the clean clothes, Tom was led back to the room where one of the officers who had found him in the park was waiting. The officer, named William, had an expression of calm and empathy that reassured Tom. "Tom," William began in a calm voice, "we're glad you're here. We're going to do everything we can to help you get back on your feet. But first, we need to understand your story. Can you tell us how you ended up here and how things got to this point?" Tom sighed, his tired eyes showing the scars of years of suffering. He began to speak, his voice hesitant at first but gaining strength as the words flowed. I don't know where to start. The war, it took everything from me. My friends, my peace, my will to live. When I came back, nothing seemed to make sense. I tried. You know, I really tried to reconnect with my family, but I couldn't. The nights were too long. The days were confusing. I lived in a constant state of alert, as if I was waiting for the next attack. William nodded, understanding. War can leave deep scars. Many who return face internal battles that no one else can see. I couldn't bear it, Tom continued, his eyes wandering around the room as if he was reliving those moments. I tried to stay home, tried to pretend I was normal, but everything I did seemed wrong. I started to drift away, first emotionally, then physically. I would leave the house and wander aimlessly, trying to find a place where I could breathe without feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Tom paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. That's how I ended up on the streets. At first, I thought it was temporary, that I would find a way back, but things only got worse. I got involved with the wrong people. People who promised help, but were only interested in taking advantage. I fell into a cycle of dependency, alcohol, drugs, anything that would make the nightmares disappear, even if just for a few hours. William listened attentively, his gaze remaining fixed on Tom without judgment, only understanding. And how did you end up in this town? Your family is from another region, isn't it? Tom nodded. Yes, my family is from another town. But after so many years on the streets, wandering from city to city, I lost contact with everything and everyone. I ended up here by chance, trying to escape some people who were using me. I didn't want to be part of it anymore, but getting out was harder than getting in. So I kept hiding, withdrawing until there was nowhere left to run. Tom's eyes were fixed on the floor, his voice trembling as he relived each detail of his descent into hell. I thought it would be the end, that I would just disappear and no one would notice. But then, that boy, Lucas, he did something I didn't expect. He saw me. He didn't just look at me, but he saw me as a person. And that made me remember who I was, even if just for a brief moment. William smiled slightly. Lucas is a special kid, and thanks to him, we're here now. We've been in contact with your family, Tom. They never stopped looking for you. They're desperate to see you again. Tom lifted his gaze, surprised. They still want me? Yes, Tom. They want you back. They know you've suffered, but they're ready to help, to give you a new chance. We're going to arrange everything, so you can be reunited with them. Tom nodded, emotional. The idea of returning to his family seemed surreal, but at the same time, it was the only thing giving him strength to go on. He didn't know what the future would hold, but the simple fact that there was a future and that he wasn't alone was more than he had dared to hope for. Thank you, Tom said, his voice choked. I don't know what to say except thank you. William extended his hand, and Tom shook it firmly. You don't need to say anything else, Tom. We're going to help you rebuild your life. Tom felt a small thread of hope grow within him. He knew the road would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was walking it alone. The time that had passed since Tom was found in the park felt like a whirlwind of emotions and changes. The help he received from the officers was the turning point in his life. Tom was welcomed, fed, dressed in clean clothes, and above all, treated with dignity and respect. With the support of the authorities and social services, Tom began to rebuild his life, one step at a time. The most anticipated moment arrived a few days later, the reunion with his family. Tom was nervous but also eager. He had mentally prepared for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare him for what was to come. When he entered the room where his family was waiting, the air seemed electrified with expectation, and then he saw them. His parents, his sister, and his younger brother, all with eyes full of tears and emotion. For a moment, no one moved, as if everyone was frozen in a living photograph, every detail etched in Tom's memory. His mother was the first to break the spell. She ran to him and enveloped him in a tight embrace, her tears soaking Tom's shoulder. "You came back, my son. You came back to us," she murmured between sobs. Tom held her tightly, letting the tears finally fall. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything," he repeated. His voice choked with emotion. His siblings joined the embrace, forming a circle of love and forgiveness. Time and distance were forgotten in that instant. They had him back, and that was all that mattered. Days later, Tom was ready to move forward and start his new life. Before leaving town, he knew there was one last thing he needed to do. Dressed in clean clothes, his beard trimmed and his hair cut, He looked like a new man. The transformation was remarkable, both outwardly and inwardly. Tom made his way to Lucas's house, the boy who had changed his life with a simple act of kindness. When Amanda opened the door, she barely recognized the man standing before her. Tom looked completely different from the worn-out man who had entered their lives weeks before. "Tom," Amanda said with a warm smile, "is that really you? You don't even look like the same person." Tom smiled, touching his hat shyly. "Yes, ma'am, it's me. I wanted to come here to say thank you. I don't know how to express how much your family has done for me. You gave me a second chance." Richard appeared at the door, and upon seeing Tom, his smile widened. "It's good to see you like this, Tom. I'm glad things are getting better for you." Tom nodded, his expression serious but full of gratitude. "I'll never forget what you did. Lucas, he saw me in a way no one else did, and that made all the difference." Amanda and Richard exchanged a knowing look, understanding how much this moment meant to Tom. At that moment, Lucas came running to the door when he saw the unexpected visitor. His eyes widened at the sight of Tom, so different but still the same man he had helped in the park. "Tom!" Lucas exclaimed, smiling broadly. Tom crouched down, extending his arms to receive Lucas's embrace. The boy ran to him, wrapping him tightly, as if trying to convey all the care and support he felt. Tom returned the embrace, closing his eyes, allowing himself to feel the connection he had created with that boy. "Thank you, Lucas," Tom said, his voice choked with emotion. "You changed my life. I'll never forget what you did for me." Lucas smiled, hugging Tom even tighter. "I just wanted to help, Tom, and I'm glad you're okay." After a long moment, Tom pulled back, smiling at the boy. "I'm ready to move on now, to start over. And I'll carry with me everything I learned here, thanks to you and your family." Amanda placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder, feeling the pride swell in her chest. "You're always welcome here, Tom, and I hope that wherever you go, you find the happiness you deserve." Tom nodded, his eyes shining. "Thank you. I'll remember that." With one last smile, Tom said his goodbyes, turning to walk toward his future. Lucas stood next to his parents, watching as Tom walked away, feeling a mix of joy and sadness. Tom was no longer the lost man they found in the park. He was back on the right path, ready to reclaim the life he had left behind. And more importantly, he was no longer alone. As Tom disappeared into the distance, Lucas knew he had done something truly important. He had changed someone's life, and that alone was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. And so, the story of Tom, the lost soldier who found his redemption through the kindness of a boy, came to an end. But for Lucas and his family, this story was just the beginning of many more to come. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.